Warning. During the course of this episode of Where Did the Road Go, you should hear no more than 3 distinct voices. If you hear more, well, let us know. This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by the following awesome individuals: Greg Ross, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Yvonne Williams, and Michael Friske. Thank you so much for helping make this show possible.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have Mr. Christopher Ernst.
Hello!
And Saxon.
Hello, hello.
That's all you get this week, just Saxon.
Just Sax. I like that one.
Yeah. We were also supposed to have Drew joining us, but I didn't send him the link before the show, and I have no way to get a hold of him other than email, so he may drop in, he may not. We will find out. But let's save the thing we were going to talk about with him to see if he pops in. Meanwhile, let's talk about the thing I just played for you guys.
Yep.
And this is a video that Jason Pargin did. Jason Pargin is the author of The Giant Dies at the End series, the Zoe series, and most recently a book, I can't remember the full name of it, saying about a black box of doom. I highly recommend all of them. The books are fantastic. But this particular video, and he's a bit of a skeptic. He has softened, it seems, over the years about that, but he's still a skeptic. And he was talking about how the phantasmal nature of ghosts, that misty, ghostly sort of thing, is more of a recent thing. He says that there's a book he references, which hopefully I'll get my hands on eventually, where this woman wrote about basically the cultural history of ghosts. And in older ghost encounters, they were basically just like people. They didn't look phantasmal in any way. They just looked like people. Mm. And you were mentioning that's in like Shakespeare and stuff.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if you look at like the representations of like in Hamlet, of Hamlet's father, the ghost, which is sort of a famous one. I mean, nowadays, it's portrayed as a ghost, but if you just read it, it's this dude who shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said it wasn't until you know more about this technology. And do you want to talk about it, Chris?
Sure. Well, what he's talking about is, and I know about this, it's something that I studied as part of extensive media history for my graduate degree, is that, this thing called phantasmagoria, which was basically like, was like supernatural theater, horror theater. I mean, if you want to think of something that maybe people have seen in modern media that looks like it. Oh, if anybody's seen, The Prestige was one of them, kind of, that was like that. But The Illusionist that came out at the same time.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if anybody remembers those movies. But The Illusionist specifically, that very much is like, that's phantasmagoria, what you're talking about there, and it's basically using magic lanterns, which are, for all intents and purposes, they're kind of like slide projectors. They're like they are slide projectors pretty much. You would have like a some sort of light source, gas lantern or flame, and it would shine through like a translucent glass plate. And this is early photographic technology, so it's part of that whole thing. And it would project it on a wall. And so, you'd get a bunch of magic lanterns, you'd be in a theater, you'd project, these things on the wall, and then people, could move them, or, an assistant would put a different slide in or something. And you would end up seeing, with this sort of rudimentary motion, these kind of what we would now call ghostly images that would, go across the stage and the screen and stuff like that. And they were semi-transparent because they're projected, like slide projecting through this glass. So the technology wasn't there where it could look opaque yet. And what he's basically saying this is that prior to supernatural horror type genre stuff using this technology for these shows that were part of essentially, it was the equivalent to movies now. The populace of, in the English speaking, or not English, but, Europe and the Americas and sort of the Western world, that then influenced their depiction of ghosts as being translucent because of this technology having this limitation that only produced translucent images.
And
that makes sense?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm trying to find the name of that book he's talking about. Because he was looking through, is this the right? I don't think that's the right list.
While you're looking for that, I've talked a bit about like the lore of my family because it kind of skips a generation. And, my mom's parents were loggers, the men in the family were loggers out in, the poor South. And a lot of the stories were like, a wagon train came through with people going out west, and there was a guy there on the wagon train with his wife and kid, and they went off into the woods, and then the man came back, and then from then on, if you were out near one of the lakes or something like that, or bodies of water in a certain place, you could see the mother and daughter come and drink water out of the stream or whatever, or the lake. But it was not like they were ethereal or anything. It just was like they looked like people, but obviously the implication was that the husband had killed them. Probably depending on like who was telling the story in the family, it was maybe they were starving or something like that. But a lot of like the old family stories like that, they just sound like the people. I think y'all have heard me tell the one about the guy sitting on top of the church. And that just looked like a person on top of the church. It wasn't something that was glowy or shimmery or translucent or anything. The guy was just there.
The other thing that I forgot to mention is that this was a direct precursor to the technology that would be used in seances. And, so all spiritualism and seances, a lot of that stuff is using, among other things, like ventriloquism and, magic and, illusionist stuff. Because this is intricately tied with illusion. It wasn't just like, I don't want to give the impression that it was just like a spectacle show. Like this became a big part of, both faking and, for a while there, people really felt like, especially when photography and film became, the technologies became more robust, that this was a kind of like speaking to the dead. Like there was something that was ontologically sort of shocking to people at the time. And the idea of being able to preserve this like, like likeness of people who have died, there was something that was sort of spiritual about that for people. So it wasn't just that it made us think of ghosts as being sort of transparent and translucent, but it became so tied, the technology itself of, moving images, photography, this idea of being able to recreate images with the seance spiritualism. The other thing that he mentions that, in the Soraya, the talk that Soraya mentioned that he was giving is that, in photography itself, if you have in early photography particularly, subjects had to sit for a very long time in order for the negative to be able to be exposed, and you had a lot of like time duration for the light to be absorbed. So you have to sit there for 3 minutes, and if there was any slight movement, you would get this really cool. I mean, you've seen it now. People have seen what that shutter speed blur looks like, and it looks very ghostly, and it's used as part of like special effects now. But it was, so it's really interesting. And, I think what we're talking about here is how this ties into how media and popular, imaginal artistic representations of things, based on either technological limitations or a particular creative aesthetic will end up dictating what we as our human beings see when it comes to supernatural stuff, be it ghosts or UFOs or airships or whatever.
Right. And the book he's referencing is The Ghost, A Cultural History by Susan Owens.
That's cool. Yeah.
So, like I said, I haven't read the book, so I don't know exactly how she does this. One of the reviewers said it's like 90% quotes.
Interesting.
And some of it's in Old English, which makes it a little bit of a laborious read. But I'll get it at some point and
after reading The Vertical Plane, I feel very prepared for that.
Right. There were bits of The Vertical Plane where it was like a long piece of Old English text. I'm like, is there a translation after this? Oh, look, there it is.
Yeah.
Because I can't do that. That's too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think Jason looks at it as this is proof that ghosts aren't real. But to me, it's like, no, this is exactly what I would expect. This stuff follows our expectations because it's just on the fringe of reality.
Yeah, exactly.
And so our brain doesn't know what to do with it. So it has to put something there. And it might not be. And this is why I say, like, ghosts may not be dead people. We may be experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing when we see a Bigfoot, a UFO, whatever. We're experiencing energy.
Yeah.
And our brain has to define that energy.
Yeah.
And give it more or less life, So it may be picking up information from the environment to give it that life. There may be something actually in that environment that can manifest when we interact with it. But how we see it is certainly going to be affected by our expectations and the set and setting, basically.
Yeah.
When you look at, the gray alien. Now, the gray alien goes all the way back to cave paintings.
Yeah.
Right.
Which, of course, gives the ancient astronaut theory, a boost there where they're like, oh, look, the grays were here back then. But you also find it in ayahuasca journeys.
Sure.
So the cave paintings are most likely made by shamans or people of a similar stature and culture who are going on these journeys and drawing what they saw. So they're drawing gray aliens. And people who are having experiences with gray aliens are probably in altered states of consciousness. Yep. Not to say they're not real entities, just that they are not. They are being defined by our expectations and other aspects of things. So when Missing Time and Communion came out, well, that gave you the template for when you have a weird experience, what those creatures look like.
Right.
And it only showed up consistently in areas those books were available. Countries that those books were not published in did not see a rise of grays.
Yep. Yeah.
And again, skeptics will say, oh, well, that's because it's not real or these people are lying. But I think it's more complicated than that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other one he takes on, he talks about this in his Black Book of Doom, because the two main characters are having various exchanges of different viewpoints. And he talks about the Betty and Barney Hill case. And the first thing he says is that this is the first UFO abduction encounter. And I'm pretty sure that's wrong.
Yeah.
Because as far as modern abduction encounters, I think Villas Boas was before that.
Right.
And I'm not.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because their experiences were in the late 60s.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to spell his name to double check this.
I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, that was 57.
Yeah.
So
that predates.
I knew it was in the 50s, but yeah.
And he had not a completely dissimilar experience. He had the sexual component in there with something that looked somewhat human. I haven't really dug deep in the case, so I don't know. I don't remember if he was hypnotized or anything like that. And again, I think under hypnotism, that gray image is more likely to come out too, even without the societal stuff, just because, again, you're dealing with an altered state of consciousness. So this might be an archetypical image that a lot of people connect into in some way.
Right. Well, there are also these sort of, evergreen images that have always been poking up, like, orbs, glowing orbs.
Yep.
Geometric shapes. all these things. Yeah. So it's not just that. I think there seems to be both. There's both this cultural component, and then there are these, sort of archetypal things, shapes, whatever. Yeah.
And when he's dealing with Betty and Barney Hill, basically he went with the skeptical conclusion that they like dozed off or something, or basically had road hypnosis, and the light they were seeing was just some kind of tower or something. And he's like, well, when you're driving, sometimes it looks like the light's moving. And I'm like, okay, you're just assuming they're stupid enough not to realize that.
Yeah.
And that's my issue there, is that you're basically, it's like saying when back in the 1800s, meteors would fall and farmers would say this rock fell from the sky, and scientists would say rocks don't fall from the sky. These farmers are just stupid.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's definitely room for doubt in the Betty and Barney Hill case, but I think the light they were following was probably an anomalous light. I mean, it could have been something of ours, that, a test craft of some kind.
Sure.
I mean, there is some suspicion of our military in some way being involved. Because I think Fuller worked for the U.S. government, if I remember right, and he's the one that hypnotized them.
Sure. There's also, I think these ideas too that it was part of early MK Ultra style stuff, in that they were involved in civil rights. They were a mixed race couple at the time. That being the term that was used, interracial couple, and they were heavily involved in this, and that there have been speculations. I think I want to say Martin Cannon. That's the big one. That's the controllers, but basically that, Betty and Barney Hill were being used as test subjects, similar to like Operation Midnight Climax, where, somehow through some delivery system, they were drugged up and had some psychedelic, weird situation where they got abducted to see if something could happen. I don't know. I mean, it's another theory.
Yeah. I mean, we'll never know for sure. And then, of course, he's like, well, initially her memories were dreams, and then she got hypnotized. Right. And I'm like, yeah, no, I realize there are issues here. Hypnosis being the biggest one. What she remembered in dreams, yeah, maybe. I mean, it could be stuff that at least symbolically represents something that happened to her. But I think something happened to them. I don't think it was just them dozing off and missing time because they fell asleep for a while, I think they would know if they pulled over and went to sleep for a while.
Yep. Yeah.
I tend to lean, after Ren had brought up the, MK Ultra angle on that. I'm very open to that idea.
Yeah.
And I always think it'd probably be somebody that has more time than me, worth going to look around, that, if you could see if people had other experiences in other parts of the country, like religious experiences or anything that had a certain sort of like, settings of people around and things like that, military and military adjacent. But, going back to the original point of, I don't think that was the first abduction experience. And then obviously we've got the Villalobos stuff, but, it's also just the interpretation of these things through cultural lenses too.
Yes.
And so, I mean, that's why, we talked before the show, like mentioning that to Josh. I mean, the whole being abducted by something that's an other that is human-like is
not new.
Not new at all. You can go back as far as humanity has been, observing itself. And there's always occurrences like that.
Yeah.
And he points out the gray imagery. Now, if I remember right, Betty and Barney Hill did not initially have the gray imagery.
No, I don't think so.
They had like men with hats on or something.
Yep.
Which sounds more like Folklore.
Yeah.
But he's saying, once she got hypnotized, she was remembering these grays, and then he's showing the Outer Limits episode that had the gray-headed, big-headed gray aliens, which a lot of people have pointed to, and it very well could have been that cultural contamination. You also had the one at the end of the Star Trek credits from the same time period the guy with the huge head.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like even in that original pilot, right?
Yeah. So I mean, yes, there's cultural contamination, but that's not the first appearance of the Greys, because again, it goes all the way back to cave paintings.
Yeah.
It's just after, and even then, you have cases after Betty and Barney Hill came to light that were not Greys. The Greys did not become a common thing until Strieber and Hopkins.
Right. And then I feel like that got doubled down in the 90s too. Was it like the Communion movie?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And of course,
because I feel like it's a real popular culture thing, like, and I say this by like, I feel like the 90s was the first time that I saw like a Grey in, knit cap smoking a blunt sticker, and that's when it's like, it's hit the mainstream.
Right.
I bought a bumper sticker and put it on my dad's SUV, and it had a picture of a Grey who was colored green, and it said "Earthlings suck" on it. And
you're right.
My dad was a pretty dry guy, but he had a little mischievous streak to him, and so I put it on there when they were on a family, or not family. It was on like a work trip somewhere, and he thought it was kind of cool, and he just left it on there.
Nice.
I was like, all right, Dad.
I love it.
But no, you're talking about like the first time you remember seeing those things too. Like, I'm sure it was a 60 Minutes piece on Whitley Strieber, but maybe it was John Mack. Maybe it was both. Or it could have been 2020, one of those two shows in the late 80s or early 90s.
Well, when did Mack start? I don't think Mack started till the 90s, did he?
That could be the case. So
yeah.
It may have been before.
Maybe 89.
Oh, if it was 89, that would have been timed right.
Okay.
Because I wasn't in junior high yet or middle school, but we watched it at home, and I got in trouble because I wouldn't go to sleep that night because I was afraid that the aliens were going to come to get me in my sleep. And, and that bothered me for a while after that. I was just sure that they were going to show up and get me. And if I pulled my sheet over my eyes high enough, then I didn't have to worry about it.
Right.
Well, clearly it worked.
Logic.
It worked. You didn't get abducted.
It did, right?
Yeah. It worked.
That you have proven the point of that many people will use. Well, you didn't get abducted, so that's the solution.
Yeah, obviously, right? Yeah.
That's all proof some people need. But yeah, it's interesting. And one of the other comments, and I've seen this 3 or 4 times recently in the last week, people will say, "Oh, that stuff only happens in the U.S. Why does it only happen in the U.S.?" And I'm like, it doesn't. Like, it's literally worldwide. What are you talking about?
Right.
We hear more about it in English-speaking countries, Australia, the UK, here, Canada, even like Mexico and South America, and less from like the Middle Eastern countries or Eastern countries, Asian countries. Russia has whole catalogs of UFO reports and abduction reports.
Gosh, yes.
And they exist in these other places as well, like Asia and the Middle East. It's just that we don't have the access to them, or people aren't studying them the same way.
I also think that there is something, so most of what we're talking about in terms of, these areas where they're being seen, I know this is not exact, but a lot of them are not Christian, but they're like colonial countries to some degree, or it's Europe. And I think that the difference there is kind of like the Eastern-Western divide, if you think about Eastern and Western religion, in that, and I'll take like Thailand, for example, there's the supernatural, and I mean that in the broadest term, is so ingrained in the everyday life of most people there that I think you're getting the same phenomena or similar phenomena, but it's just being called different things. It doesn't have to do with aliens.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I think there's some of that. I mean, at least, from my experience and my relationship to, South Asian culture through, India and stuff like that. It's, I certainly think that from my experiences being there and, having that be part of my upbringing.
Well, you're right, Chris. I agree with that. And like, I wish I could find these message boards I'd been on years ago, but I had found some where people in India were recounting when they had encountered deities from mythology. And it would be just like us talking, or people in the United States talking about whether they saw an angel or something on the road or came to them in their dream. But it was fascinating because there were certain places that were known where you could go and see some of these,
Sure.
And like there was a temple that was very far out, and sometimes if you went by there, the mythological character that was associated with it was like a giant, and sometimes you would see him, off in the distance walking by, and he's like 10 feet tall. But it was like he was a physical person, that was just there. But that's the thing, like, this happened to be in English, so it was people that, spoke English as well from that country that were conversing in English. But, if that wasn't put together that way, I never could have found it. And so how would I even go about looking for, people's, contactee, abduction experiences and things like that in languages that I'm completely unfamiliar with.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's an account, or several of them. Like, remember talking to somebody at one point about an account that they had, and these are all Westerners. These are all like Australian or, European or American people going to India, and they're all people that are involved in the Meher Baba stuff. So they're all going to this very similar place. Several of them have seen UFOs, above the ashrams, and I'm talking like American style UFOs,
right?
Like, the sort of whatever pop culture, Close Encounters type thing. It happens. I think it's also interesting too that these are English-speaking people from these colonial countries that told me that. But they also said that when they talked to the people that live there, the local, people who run the Meher Baba compound and stuff like that, the people who are part of the, the like circle, they say that happens often, and they just kind of dismiss it because they, there's this sort of different, like, it's like, oh, it's just part of like, the spiritual hierarchy, cosmos. They don't even think about what it is.
Right.
That'll happen. Yeah.
It's interesting to understand that these cultures view this stuff different. Like, and also modern interpretations are different than, like we were just saying with ghosts, are different than past interpretations because of how we understand reality, how our culture understands reality. So, like, you could say, well, Bigfoot encounters didn't start till like the 50s. Yeah, under the idea of Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Right.
But before that, there's plenty of wild man encounters and giant gorilla encounters and stuff that are basically Bigfoot encounters under a different name.
Yeah. But, if you have a newspapers.com subscription and you go search Bigfoot, they're only going to go back so far.
Right.
But if you know how to search, wild man and gorilla encounter and all these other things, then you can find other results that go back further. I mean,
yeah, and that's what Tim did with the Bigfoot in Pennsylvania book.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he do two? Yeah. Did he do one in California, or am I remembering wrong?
I don't know.
I know he did the Pennsylvania one though, and that's what he had.
Yeah, he did the Pennsylvania one. Yeah.
Lots of gorilla and wild man encounters, which could be any number of things, just like Bigfoot encounters could be any number of things. I would even say and I don't know, maybe Tim would disagree, but for me, I always think that there has to be some, especially if you go back to the earliest werewolf, depictions and stuff like that famous woodcut. They're all much more, I think, aligned with this wild man idea. Yeah,
and for me, it's at least there's like sort of this, they're cousins if you think about it from sort of a ontological standpoint, and so I would say that because you have werewolf stuff going all the way back to Rome, documented. So, yeah.
Well, and I'll add one more to that too. I mean, Gilgamesh's best friend, Enkidu, is a furry guy that he has horns and some depictions of him, but he was a wild man that lived and talked with animals and had, bestial strength and all these things.
Yeah, there's also Hanuman from the from Indian mythology, who was essentially a monkey man, and he's a god, but it's this depiction of this sort of this type of, I don't know, wild human, something missing link human, I don't know, different morphology, But as we go back to, and we also see this, I don't think we can discount all of the revisionist history that we keep on seeing when it comes to new discoveries about the human genome, the different types of humans that existed and were probably as smart as us, and kind of dismissing that Neanderthal was an idiot type thing.
Yeah.
And you keep on seeing more and more of these different, from the Denisovans to the Homo florensis.
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah, florensis, to different Neanderthals. I think there are a couple of other different sort of subgroups that have been discovered, or there have been fossil remains discovered. And I think, the more and more we see this, the more and more we're going to see that maybe this idea that our Homo sapien brain is the most developed one isn't necessarily true,
Well,
and that they were capable of, the same level of thinking that we have.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. There was an article I just saw recently on Neanderthals where they were saying Neanderthals might have been cannibals because they found, I guess, a Neanderthal with evidence that it had cannibalized another Neanderthal. And I'm like, okay, that's one. That doesn't mean all Neanderthals were cannibals,
Yeah.
I mean, that's still a part of some, or recently that was still a part of certain, indigenous or tribal cultures.
Yeah.
That's not,
Yeah. There's a book. Oh my gosh. I wish I could remember the name of it. I read almost all of it. That is just a thought experiment. It's not a, this is hard science or anything like that. But the guy that wrote it, I think, is actually has a PhD in music theory. But it's like us versus them, or man versus. I'll look it up in a second and come back with a name. But anyway, it was just a going through different ways of looking at Neanderthal, and the big lens was like, what if this was a predatory hominid, that was built to be strong and was a cannibal, and going through ways you could read some of the adaptations or differences to say, to kind of look at it as like, oh, well, this could be good for predation. This could also be good for predation. This could also be good, Now, there's multiple ways to take it, but I think the point he was really trying to make, besides the fun story of like, we were fighting, cannibals that were stronger than us and could see in the dark, was, there are multiple ways to look at fossil remains and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But let me see if I can find the book too while we're talking. But it's a fun read. It would certainly be crazy if that were the case. But if you, to your point, like we had cultures of Homo sapiens recently that were cannibals. So
we have Homo sapiens who are cannibals. So I mean,
Yeah. So I mean, why would you not expect in certain circumstances, at least, to have Neanderthals that were also cannibals?
But it's the way these things develop with so little evidence. They find like one example of something and they just apply it to the entire, everything. Like,
yeah.
Oh, it looks like this group did this. They must all have done this. It's like, that's not how things work.
Yeah. It says like, even Google here just coming up with their quick AI summary at the beginning. It was like, yeah, there's evidence that Neanderthals practiced cannibalism from multiple sites, but you don't know what that means.
Right.
Like, did all of them, or did certain groups do, or certain circumstances, or
and was it, oh, this person from our tribe died, we're going to eat them in tribute, or are they eating their enemies, or or are they just so low on food that it's a Donner Party situation?
Yeah, well, exactly. And here's the thing about back then. You understood how much the land around you could support in terms of life. And if you encountered another group of people, that also meant that there was more competition for resources. That might mean that your family might not survive.
Yeah.
Right. You might kill each other. And
Yeah.
if things are really tight, you might eat them.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah. There's a scary thought.
So I think that's mostly what I wanted to cover there. Like I said, when I have Josh on in a couple of shows, I'm going to talk to him about the whole UFO thing and abductions, because I know he'll have a lot to say, because he wrote that entire book on abductions. But the ghost stuff was interesting because, again, to me, it just says that this stuff is not what it looks like. It doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the idea too of, the media, or, the way in which we communicate, and the images and the ideas that we put out there from our imagination or from our experiences into the world do impact how these things show up. That co-creation in the largest sense, I think it points to that very strongly.
In the last show with Hugh, we were talking about like the wild hunt and stuff, and I asked him, like, could it be an egregore? I mean, could any of this stuff basically be an egregore of some sort,
Right.
Like not a tulpa, but a conceptual idea that has taken life because so many people believe in it, or put energy into its existence.
Yeah.
And over time it fades because people stop believing in it because culture changes.
And also think about, in the past 200 years, the population boom. I mean, how many people we have, if you think about it from like a matrix, humans as batteries type thing, like we have so much more power than we did, 100 years ago, just because of the human power. How many more thinking minds do we have?
And the thing is, on the one hand, it's more diversified because there's so many people, but also because of our ability to communicate so easily, it's also more solidified.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it almost balances it out. Like the unique experiences of individuals combined with the access to information and mythology and whatever the zeitgeist is, kind of balances out that influx of new minds and new ideas to kind of keep everything kind of homogenous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which brings us to disclosure. And Drew...
Yay, disclosure.
So Drew from Promethean Flame wanted to come on and talk about this as well as some other stuff. And so I figured we should watch this disclosure movie. And what's it called?
Age of Disclosure.
Yeah. I honestly got 20 minutes into it and I couldn't take it. And I was watching, and I was doing other stuff at the time, and it was annoying me so much I had to turn it off.
Yeah. That's the same reaction that I had when I watched it when it first came out. I, got a copy of it, but I watched it again, today as I was doing some other stuff, and I sort of, sucked it up and kept on through and watched the whole thing, and it didn't change my mind.
And I have seen a lot of people say they think it's great. They think it's a great movie or a great documentary. And I'm looking at it going, this is all the same stuff, just packaged nicely.
Yeah.
It's very well done. Yeah. I mean, it's very well done. And I think that, it probably is one of the least, it's cringy for different reasons, but it's not cringy like Corbell's stuff, and I think that it's more broadly marketed and packaged, and that's not bad. I mean, it's like it's people who knew it certainly knew what they were doing in terms of trying to make something that kind of goes down smooth for people that are interested in watching it. Right.
It's so many things here. First of all, the disclosure thing is not new. I think it was one of you guys just earlier said when you think disclosure, you think Greer.
Right. I mean, he was the one that popularized big D disclosure as a term, That was his whole thing. And it really isn't until very recently that, I didn't associate it completely with Greer.
And even before him, you had people pushing for disclosure. He was the one that made it more mainstream back in the 90s. And then since then, it's just been this repeating cycle, and the cycle just gets faster but nothing really truly new or novel comes out.
Right.
Yeah. Nothing novel comes out. And I almost feel like, no, I don't almost, I do feel like this. Because I don't think that the government knows much more than we do. If they know anything more than we do.
Right.
But I think, then that begets people creating arguments for why there's not disclosure. And, well, it would be catastrophic for people's face or something like that, or the stock market would crash or the economy would crash or whatever. And, I don't think that is the reason we don't do those things. I think it's because we just don't have much to say at the end of the day. And as we see in the last few years, you wouldn't believe what the government would say anyway. I wouldn't.
Oh yeah, I mean that's not, and that's not new.
I mean the whole age of disclosure makes this assumption, and I find this to be kind of like makes me feel like it's propaganda that in order for this to be legitimate, it needs to be military people, and they need to, I guess, be old and dressed in suits, except for Lou, and sitting in libraries. And I mean, they're all old white dudes. I'll say it. They really are. Besides, like one lady and one one black guy. And it's like a sliver of the UFO phenomenon. It's completely from this militaristic, technology-driven, hawkish, pro-nationalistic. We trust the government, but at the same time, there's kind of saying in the same way that you see going on nowadays. People are saying there's this legacy deep state that's keeping it from us, and we have to revolt against that. It really, seems very one-sided to me. And I've certainly seen in sort of the, popular discussion of it, people who are not from the United States really do see it. People are interested in the UFO phenomenon, really see it as being this like completely like military like Pentagon propaganda piece.
Yeah. Well, and the two things for me, like one, the library stuff with all of them in the that setting, it was almost like a parody of the scholarly, in a suit in the library with all the leather bound books in the background. I'm like, did they CGI this thing to make it even like more library?
Right. We've read all these books.
It just was kind of like, okay,
that interspersed with those shots of Elizondo in the Lincoln Memorial or something, looking really pensive. Staring out.
Great. But the other end of that too, and we said this on the show a lot, like if you are talking about things that are supposed to be classified, you're going to go to jail.
Yeah.
If you're a whistleblower, you're going to go to jail.
Yep.
We've seen other people that are whistleblowers that have had to flee the country and, been in and out of prison as they've been arguing their cases, and they're still being followed by, law enforcement just to harass them and make them, miserable. Like, you don't get to do this unless you're, a paid spokesperson propagandist.
Right.
Or you're grifting and you're just making it all up.
Or you're being used.
Yeah.
That too. Yeah.
Like Bob Lazar, wherever he may be now, I think initially was just being used.
I do too.
I think Grush is.
Yeah, I think Grush is too.
Yeah.
They want this info out there. They make it seem like, oh, you're special and you're gonna, And in the case of Lazar, they told him not to talk about it, and here he is bringing people out to Area 51 to look at the UFOs.
Right.
In ordinary circumstances, you would not hear from him again.
Yeah.
And his whole thing about like, oh, I went to the press so they couldn't silence me. It's like, that doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. No.
We'd be treated like Edward Snowden.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. And that's the thing that, like, I'm not saying this to be a negative thing about George Knapp, because I think Knapp's probably at some point got contacted by, somebody in the government, and he's like, okay, I'll do my duty to the United States and I'll go talk to this guy.
Yeah.
And that happened to be Bob. And here we are, I really think that's how that probably happened. Yeah. And some people are a little more knowing of what they're doing than others. But I have a lot of issues with it. And just as an aside, my aviation side, I just get, tweaked about things. Stratton starts talking about the FAA not tracking anything that's not squawking, which means it has a transponder code on the radar, and how this is creating all these threats for aviation and what have you. And anyway, it was very disingenuous and intentionally misleading. If Chris is flying an airplane, he's going to have a box in there that's a transponder that you have a little 4 dials in that are different numbers. Mm-hmm. And Tower, if you're using IFR, would give you a specific 4-number sequence to put in that transponder so they can keep track of you.
Right.
And it sends a signal every time it gets pinged by radar back to say, hey, this is Chris. Yeah. But they're still seeing everything else in the sky. And if there are things near you in the sky, they will call you and tell you, hey, there's something near you at, your 11 o'clock, 1,000 feet below, what have you. And anyhow, I had that happen to me several times flying. And one time I was flying over a ridge, and Area called me up and was like, Area's like a wider ATC. You've got something that's going to be coming from, the east to the west, 500 feet below you. Not quite sure what it is. Can you look out and identify it? And I was flying at 6,500 feet, little kind of Cessna-like 172 plane. Anyway, it was 4 hang gliders flying under me. And,
okay.
They don't have a transponder, but they could be seen on radar.
Are you sure they were hang gliders?
I mean, they could have been trying to look like something else. But anyway, even flocks of birds show up on radar.
Yeah.
That's why they were having such problems when there were the balloon issues and stuff like that, because it's not that they don't see things, it's that they see everything.
Right. Yeah,
and so you don't know what to highlight other than to say, if it's close to other planes, you have to call it out,
Well, I mean, another thing that is, I won't say lying, but it's sort of like this manipulation of this baking of the truth in order to further the sort of agenda of it, is that they infer at the very end, basically by saying something along the lines of, UAPs have shown up since we started testing nuclear weapons. And they're really inferring that this is the beginning of the phenomena, which I think for anybody that listens to the show, that most of us, I think, are of the opinion that that's horse manure. Right. And that, this has been going back, till the beginning of human history, the phenomena of seeing things like this. So, it seems like a very narrow slice of the phenomena to me. And, it's cool if it gets people, I guess, interested in it. But I feel like when it's ended up happening is that, it'll get you interested in it. But if you take this as being sort of, the truth of the matter, you're only seeing a fraction of the entire picture. And it's also one that is, I think heavily steeped in this sort of nationalistic, pro-military propaganda that feels disingenuous to me, because it's like trying to further a particular agenda that has to do with maybe a particular faction of people, and it's not this broad truth-telling, disclosure. If they called this film, military, like UAPs and the military, in the nuclear age, I might even be more accepting of it. But the fact that it's being presented as this kind of, this definitive, this all-encompassing definitive piece on the phenomena right now, and very important. I have issues with that.
Well, yeah, I mean, Terry Lovelace shows up in there, and they talk about his first time he saw, he was a black diamond over the nuclear missile silos in Missouri. when he was in the military. And, I was kind of like, that's interesting that they picked him out to sort of go back to this nuclear weapons connection. They found a guy that was, had a military experience seeing, a black aircraft over a nuclear silo. And, it's a very niche experience, but fits perfectly in that narrative that they were going for of, this very like military industrial complex driven thing. And, just like we're talking before the show, at the end, it starts going a lot towards what if China has these things?
Yeah. What
if China is reverse engineered some alien tech and they're using it to spy on us? And that's how the drones are coming in, But it was amazing how many times they say China over and over at the end of the film.
Yeah, and there's this signaling towards there being some sort of secrets that are being kept by the deep state and the military industrial complex, but at the same time, it's like reaffirming this sort of, I don't know, there's this kind of like, for me at least, a little bit of cognitive dissonance there. Like I feel like they're critiquing it, but not. It's almost like I don't know. It's tough for me to figure out, I guess, where I'm trying to think like who would be the one and what people are going to get out of this. I don't know. My only thought is that this is mostly CIA backed, and that's only because there's so many ex-CIA in here.
Right.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it goes on the assumption that UFOs are extraterrestrial.
Yes.
Or interdimensional, possibly, but it goes on with that very basic structure that these are craft. And that assumption alone takes you in the wrong direction.
Right.
So that's the first issue. Like, but it's a simple thing for people to follow. Like, it's one thing to tell people that flying saucers are real. It's another thing to be like, yeah, well, these things seem to be some kind of psycho-spiritual thing that affect people on a personal level that seem to lead to a spiritual journey. That's a whole different thing, and that's too much for most people, especially if they already have a religious dogma behind them.
Mm-hmm.
So they have to go with these are extraterrestrials. They're here. We don't know what to do about them, but we're, and all the different things. Look at all these videos we have. Well, none of those videos are particularly good.
Right.
None of them are definitive, like, oh, that's something truly weird. It's always, well, here's this thing, and, like the Tic Tac. It's like, okay, well, that could be plasma. That could be a drone. That could be, it could be a number of things. You'll get people who will say, oh, we would know about it if we had it. No, we wouldn't. That might be the whole point, to see what interpretation other countries make on this stuff.
Yeah. It's weird, too, because, going back to Greer, I feel like at least when the majority of the time that the big D disclosure, that phrase, I associated it with him, there was always this very specific thing about disclosure is necessary because the technology that they are keeping from us is free energy technology, and that will change the way the world works. It will, upend everything and make our lives so much better. They talk about that very slightly in Age of Disclosure, but for the most part, there's no other reason given as to why this stuff needs to be disclosed other than the government is keeping things from us.
Yeah, well, duh.
Yeah, right. And so, like, what's the point, Like, that's what Elizondo's, it's more like, I don't know, to some degree, it feels like this puff piece on Elizondo, that's
True.
trying to, like, paint him in a particular way.
Yeah.
And it's using the disclosure UFO UAP thing as, this is the crusade that he's on. But I don't really get, and if you look through it, they talk a lot about, like, we'll find out at some point how this impacts us. And Elizondo, I want my story to be told, but it's never in the same way that Greer was like, we want disclosure because you're keeping free energy from us.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What was the thing I was just going to say? It definitely seems like here's Lou Elizondo. He's your hero. He's your your guy who's going to get everything for you. He's on your side. But the thing is, the government, from their standpoint, does not owe us anything. They do not have to tell us anything. Think about it. Look at how much people have pushed for disclosure of the Epstein files.
Right.
And it's gotten almost nothing. JFK, how many decades since JFK, and still all the files aren't out there. More and more are getting released, but that's also because all the people involved are dead.
Yeah.
So those were not coming out when people who may have had integral roles were still alive. Because if people put the pieces together, I don't think they'd like the picture. Well, I mean, some of us understand that this was, we assassinated a sitting president as a country. And it was probably a very small group of people connected with a couple different areas. Who killed JFK? Was that Rob Reiner who did that?
It was. I was actually just thinking, and he's also dead now. But it was Killing Kennedy. He and Soledad O'Brien did that great podcast. It was just investigative journalism, putting all of the information that's out there together.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic one. It's worth listening to.
And look at how long it took and how much effort it took to get that. I mean, everyone wants the Epstein files released, except, of course, the people who are probably going to be implicated in something bad. And the thing is, people will assume, well, Trump's hiding them because Trump's implicated. And maybe he is, but also it might be because people that are powerful are going to be implicated. It may not be Trump. It might be somebody who is, or numerous people who are in power in a way that is going to be very disruptive if those names get out. And I think absolutely those names should get out. I don't care if it's disruptive, but I think that's the real reason we're not seeing those.
It's an entry point to a very large, if anybody's interested, in it, I would recommend the writings of a particular journalist and scholar on autocracy whose name is Sarah Kendzior, and she's sort of a pariah at this point because and she lives in St. Louis, but she's a very interesting writer and she's written some great books about it. Is that it's really part of to get into the conspiracy world. It is an entryway into a vast, global, network of essentially it's corrupt money. It's the mafia runs the world, and I don't mean the Italian mafia.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, think about the push behind getting these Epstein files releases, and how hard it's been, and how little we've seen. But yet they're going to release UFO stuff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a niche thing that not anywhere near as many people want released. They will not release anything they don't want to release. They will find ways around it in the case of the Epstein files. But with the UFO stuff, we don't even know what they have to release. At least with Epstein, we know they have stuff. Mm-hmm. But with UFOs, we don't know what they have.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking about the audience for that, because for the age of disclosure again, and you've got your kind of the public at large, that the segments that would buy into it. But, I think part of it is military industrial complex aimed. And then part of me wonders if Lou's not going to run for Senate or something in a few years.
Right? Yeah.
Totally. I actually kind of think that's the play, is hey, I've been looking out for our national security this whole time.
Yeah.
And, things were coming over and spying on us, and we didn't know what it was. And I was trying to raise a red flag. And, I'm here to protect you, and you should vote for me.
Yep.
Better hope no laws get passed against, senators and stocks there, Mr. Elizondo. It won't be worth your while anymore.
All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick mid-show break here. Contact info and a recommendation. Contact info is quite simple. wheredidtheroadgo.com. All the links to our social media is there, all the email addresses to email me, and a link tree going to all my other stuff, like my music show, The Last Exit for the Lost. And if you want to become a patron, you can do so there at the big Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content every show. The show's a couple weeks early, commercial free, etc., etc. And it's well worth your $3 if you want to help support the show. As for a recommendation, I don't know if I recommended them before, but the series of books that were written that the movie Annihilation was based on, and there's an interesting story there, but there's 3 books, Acceptance, Annihilation, and Authority, all written by Jeff Vandermeer, and he just released one more recently called Absolution. It's a trilogy, so there's 4 books. I guess he's going the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy route. If you like the movie, although it's based on the books, the guy who made the movie read the books and then, or at least read the first book, and then years later made the movie without ever rereading it. He took what he got from the movie or what he got from the book and wrote the movie, which is really interesting. And I love the movie. And the books are very, very different, though, because, again, he was taking the feel and what he remembered, and then he turned it into the movie without rereading the book. So although it is based on the book, it's very loosely based on concepts of the book. But all 4 books are good. This latest one I absolutely love. It might be my favorite, honestly. But it's been a while since I've read the other ones, so I'm not sure. They're all available on audiobook, which is how I'm actually reading them, listening to them, etc. Yeah, highly recommended if you like really weird fiction. All right, back to the show. And I am here with Chris and Saxon, and we're discussing currently the age of disclosure, which apparently is a very long age that's been going on for decades.
Right. Yeah.
But specifically the documentary. And there was something I was just going to say when you mentioned Lou. There was, man, what the hell was it? It's on the tip of my brain. And that was actually the thing that made me turn it off, is listening to Lou. I was just like, I can't. You are so full of crap. Oh, so he's talking about, how they had to dig deep to, why aren't the government investigating UFOs? What's going on here? And he said something, and I think I was only half listening, but he said something about finding this long-running program to investigate UAPs. And I'm like, well, duh. Even if you're just making stuff up off the cuff, there's no way the government is going to have unknown objects in the sky over the country and not investigate them.
Right. Yeah.
They may not publicly, they may not acknowledge that they're doing it, but anything anomalous in the skies that they don't know what is, they're investigating it. They're keeping track of it. Whether it be an extraterrestrial spacecraft or just some toy or something that someone's flying around up there that they shouldn't be. There's no point where they weren't looking into this stuff just for national security, if nothing else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to be like, oh, well, then I started this group and this group was to invest. It's like, you know what? You didn't. This was already in place. Anything you're seeing publicly is just a show, just like Project Blue Book. It was just a show. Any real investigations you're not hearing about. You're not going to see them. That's just how it goes. And no amount of saying we want to see it is going to make them show it to us, because they don't care. They don't owe us anything. I mean, they do in a sense, because they're supposed to be working for us, but all they have to do is slap national security on it. And well, now we can't show you because our enemies may see.
Yeah.
So I think it's pointless to think that you're really going to get anything significant out of disclosure. You might get a few crumbs. You might get a couple of semi-interesting videos, but nothing that's going to tell you anything important, if they even know anything important. Again, if anything, if you read Messengers of Deception by Valet, he says, they basically... The government infiltrates all the UFO groups back in the 50s, 60s, 70s because it was useful to them.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And you have numerous UFO stories. What's the one where they said they sent astronauts to another planet and stuff, and they were
Serpos.
Serpo.
Yeah.
And that was all, as Greg Bishop will tell you, that was all code. Those releases were all codes for spies.
Sure.
And they were writing them in a specific way, and the guy who was publishing them was correcting them because they were written poorly. And they would stop correcting them, and eventually because he wouldn't stop correcting them, they started giving them to someone else.
Didn't Bill Ryan end up being the person that they were like coming through?
I don't remember. I just remember hearing it on Coast to Coast initially and being like, oh, this is just a bunch of crap. And then it turned out, hey, this was a bunch of crap. But it still gets brought up.
Yeah.
Like these things do not die.
Yeah.
And it's astonishing to me. I mean, I understand if you're just getting into the field. Like, you don't know what's what. But the fact that these things still get play on major outlets is kind of like, why? Why would you be looking at this? Why is Billy Meyer still a thing?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, none of this stuff actually goes away. There was the screaming alien guy, the guy who claimed he shot the alien that killed his dog or whatever and put it in his freezer, and then it started screaming. And when Art Bell came back, that was one of his first guests. And it's like, oh my God, this guy's been debunked 1,000 ways. Like,
well, I mean, if you look at the UAP, UFO social media, you know, it's you see, like I will sometimes go on there just to look, but you know, it's very frustrating. You'll see like Phil Schneider, people will be like, or you know, Dan Burrish or something like that. And I don't know if anybody knows who these people are.
I don't.
But it's like, yeah, you know, I mean, I know you guys know, but
no, I don't. Those names don't.
Oh no, yeah, these are like, you know, okay, go back 20 years on like above top secret forums. And these were these guys that came out with, you know, some BS story that's easily been debunked. Like Dan Burrish was he was like a car dealer in Vegas or something like that. You know, he was the guy that did the whole J-Rod Project Looking Glass thing. I think his website is called like Where Eagles Dare or something. You know, or Phil Schneider. Phil Schneider was the guy who obviously had some, you know, severe mental illness, like maybe schizophrenia, and he was one of the guys that talked about he was the Dulce base.
Okay, that name does.
This is where I got shot by and it was like, you know, some injury he had from surgery or something. Yeah.
Got into a firefight with the aliens.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
But I mean, gosh, the amount of times, you know, Richard Doty just shows up.
Yeah, or Doty, yeah. Or, you know, there's a bunch of other people, and you know, different narratives that'll come up, and yeah.
And he, I got a kick out of like how often I saw Rick Doty on TikToks being shared.
Yeah.
And, you know, initially when I got on TikTok, and I've gotten off there since then because I just don't have any use for it. But, you know, I'd be like, have you guys ever looked this person up? And the amount of people that would just flame me for calling out, like, I don't know if you should trust this guy.
Yeah.
I'm all of my anonymous accounts have totally been banned on all the social medias because they do not like what I say. So, but that was a long time ago.
But, you know, and that's the thing. Doty pops back up. It's like, okay, Doty has flat out admitted that he was a disinfo agent. And here you are putting up things he said.
Yeah, where he's like, oh, no, totally, aliens are real, you know.
Like, let's make no mistake.
Which they may well be, but...
Right, well, yes, there is probably alien life everywhere.
Yeah.
And we probably can't recognize most of it. So that's A. I have little doubt that there is alien life, probably intelligent alien life in our own solar system, but it just doesn't look like what we expect life to look like.
Right.
So now I'm not even taking like the animist view when I'm saying that where everything's alive, because I also suspect that that's the case, that consciousness is just a collection of smaller things. I mean, think about it. All our cells probably have some rudimentary sense of consciousness that keep it working. Mm-hmm. And that builds into us, and we're a part of a bigger thing that's a part of a bigger thing that's a part of a bigger thing. And that's, you know, we're a part of the Earth. The Earth is part of the solar system. The solar system is part of the Milky Way. And all of these things may have a form of consciousness that we simply can't comprehend.
Mm-hmm.
But sure. you look at gas giants like Jupiter or Saturn, and there's no reason to think there isn't intelligent life deep in those planets that we would not recognize because we're looking for life like us.
Mm-hmm.
So, Are there aliens? Yes, there's almost certainly aliens. I'd be shocked if there was no other life in the entire universe. But B, whatever this is probably not alien.
Yeah,
and whatever it might be, and I mean, there's so many options of what it could be. it is unlikely to be extraterrestrial. It is something that is very connected with us and who we are deep down, and it is very real.
Yeah.
And that's always the problem. Do you believe in, UFOs? Well, that's the wrong question. I mean, everyone should believe that there are things in the sky we can't identify because we don't know everything.
And there could be various different things. I mean, right now in the sky, there are a lot of things up there. There are planes, there are birds,
but that we can't identify, is what I'm saying.
Doesn't mean they're all the same thing. Oh,
right.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's like, we look up in the sky and we see all these things. A leaf blowing by is not the same thing as a cloud.
Right.
They are both in the sky. Yeah.
So I mean, when you talk UFOs, it can be stuff that, the military has. It could be some kind of organic life. It could be intelligent plasma. It could be craft from another dimension or another time. It could be, the list just goes on.
Cryptoterrestrials, man.
Yeah, the list goes on, and each case could be different. It's not like we solve one case, we've solved them all. There was the, and Saxon, you probably know this better than I do, but there was the craft they were testing that was responsible for some of the high altitude UFO sightings in like the 50s and 60s.
Oh, when they were testing the U-2?
Yeah, I guess it was a U-2, yeah.
Yeah.
And, the CIA came out and said, well, those particular sightings, the ones where they were at high altitudes in commercial jets, and they saw something that was actually the U-2 in these cases. And like the newspaper accounts would say things like, UFOs have been explained.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's like, a few. And
exactly.
But, that doesn't explain all UFOs. Like, how does this, I don't know. I don't get it because I want information to be accurate.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have that thing where I want my personal belief to be right. My personal belief wants to match up with what is right.
Right. Yeah.
So you give me new information and I go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
That like, as much as I'll say hypnosis is not a reliable memory tool, there are cases where people have remembered validated information under hypnosis. Hypnosis also puts you in an altered state of consciousness, and we don't really understand hypnosis. So it could be that, as Red Pill suggested to me, that people are having a very real experience while they think they're remembering something.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like, I went from hypnosis bad to, okay, hypnosis is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But it should not be relied on to explain what's going on in missing time encounters.
Right.
Yes.
I have no problem changing my view on things with better info and different ideas, and I'm not married to any of them. It's kind of like, oh, I think this right now, but tomorrow I may see something that goes, oh, but what if it's this?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which, by the way, we should definitely circle back around to Taylor about his work with his mother to do the hypnosis and create an abduction experience for him.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Just remind me of that. I think a lot of people would dig that.
I mean, I think that there's something to be said about, the idea of hypnosis and particularly where it came from. And, very traditional Austin Osman Spare ideas of, getting into that, blanking on what he would call that state to activate your sigil. But yeah, or just the idea of hypnosis and, that type of concentrated meditation sort of based, supernatural practice, magical practice.
Yeah. It's just, there's this pop culture vision of what all this stuff is.
Yep.
So, and most of it's ridiculous. So when you talk to somebody who doesn't really even get into the pop culture stuff, they realize it's ridiculous. They think, why would you be interested in this? And it's not until you get a chance to really sit down and talk to them that they understand, oh, this is not what I thought it was.
Right.
But that pop culture thing is people have so much fun with it. They want it to be real. And it's a simple answer to say the things you're seeing in the sky are aliens coming here, even in a hostile way, we understand that.
Yep.
But when you're saying, well, these things that are, that people are experiencing may be not physical in the way we think they are, and they may be trying to help us discover who we really are on an individual basis, that's weird.
Yes.
But it also fits the facts better than extraterrestrial.
Sure.
So, or same with Bigfoot, like an undiscovered ape is interesting, but when you're saying, but there can't be an undiscovered ape in these locations, it's just not possible to maintain a breeding population or even hide a single giant ape in areas that just aren't forested enough. Like that leaves, what are people seeing? And so a lot of times that just ends up with people going, well, they're making it up, they're lying, they're hallucinating, whatever. But no, because this stuff exists again across history and culture.
Yeah.
So what are we left with? We're left with something we simply don't understand, and we should stop trying to label.
Yep.
And then we get a documentary who's like, oh yeah, the government knows everything. Okay, well, no. And like I said, I couldn't finish it, so
there's not much else I'll say. I don't think it is necessary especially if you have other things to digest.
Yeah.
Other media to digest.
Other more interesting documentaries to watch, because there are some good ones out there. It's just so much of it. It's just dumbed down is what it is. And again, for the general public, it's like ghost hunting shows. When you look at ghost hunting shows, I mean, I will say Ghost Hunters did a decent job when they started, but still they were starting with an assumption. Ghosts are dead people. How do we prove that? Instead of being like, there's weird phenomena, let's analyze it and then come to a conclusion as to what we're analyzing. They started with, we already know what this is. But at least when Ghost Hunters started, I think they were honest. There was some pareidolia here and there, but they caught some interesting things. None of it was proof of ghosts. None of it was proofs of, survival of the spirit or anything. It could be. It's certainly a possibility, but it wasn't a definitive proof of any kind. But at the point where all these other shows started popping up and they were just faking stuff to make it more exciting, all that stuff just went, it was gone. But, people will go out ghost hunting with all those, spirit boxes and the portal boxes. Those are the worst. I mean, they sound and look great, but as far as
laughing because they're so it's so theatrical.
Yeah, I mean, because it's basically a spirit box running through reverb in a box full of black lights.
I got some pedals that'll do that.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, this looks cool and it sounds cool, but it's utterly meaningless.
Yeah.
Spirit boxes, that's something that I had no interest in spirit boxes. Like, this was just, okay, this is just pareidolia. But then enough people have told me, no, they've gotten really significant results from them where I'm like, okay, I'm open to this now.
Sure. I think there's something to be said about using them in the same way that, that using these chaotic interfaces can be done. I mean, I think that, and I say that tarot and, particularly I Ching are, these types of chaos divination, using something that has randomness in it.
Yeah, true.
That's what's kind of cool about the Estes method, as much as I dislike, Hellier. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean that was I think the most interesting part of Hellier was the Estes method, and I didn't think much. Like, again, I've talked about this before. I didn't think they got much of interest, but the can had some retrocausality stuff to it that was interesting.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And that's the other thing. You're entering sort of an altered state of consciousness when your senses are blocked off, and all you're hearing is this radio signal that's being siphoned randomly through. So, but yeah, I mean, so much of this stuff is just, it's overwhelmed our culture, and there's a whole deeper level that's way more interesting. But I don't know that a lot of people want that interesting level. They want it to be safe. Even if it's scary, they want it to be what they understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was going to say something else about ghost hunters too, but I mean, like I said, ghost hunters brought it more. It became more acceptable to talk about that stuff in the mainstream. Ancient aliens, same thing. You know, it made it more acceptable for people to talk about this stuff. And that's good. Disclosure made, you know, the whole disclosure movement, ATIP, all that, made it more acceptable to talk about UFOs without being laughed at.
Yeah, right. Which is, and I will admit, is great, but I feel like to some degree, too, the openness of that has, you know, allowed it. Same thing that happens when something becomes, you know, open. It kind of gets, I don't know, there's a certain level of, I don't want to say thinning out or corruption, to those aren't the right words, but I think it gets, you know, I don't know, it gets tossed around in a weird way where it becomes used maybe or exploited.
It's co-opted.
Yeah, co-opted. It's a good way.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge with it. But, you know, I was almost about to excuse it and say that's just the way things go, but you get good stuff out of it too. But it shouldn't have to be that way.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, so many of these cases pop up again and again, and so many of the names pop up again and again. You know, like Avi Loeb at this point, I can't take seriously.
Yeah.
And he's someone that I had respect for at one point.
Mm-hmm.
Where I was like, okay, Avi Loeb's interesting. He's an open-minded scientist. And now it's like, but now he just thinks everything's a spaceship.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you got Kim Kardashian on his board there to help.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, can you scream, I just want attention more than that, you know?
Right.
It's like, you're not doing a scientific study if you have Kim Kardashian on your board. Like what? And the same with guys like Hal Puthoff. Like, they did some interesting stuff back with the Stargate program and all that. And I always had some respect for him, but now I'm like, how much of your stuff is just disinfo at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I was saying, I think I would say that, you know, the presence of so many sort of CIA folks or CIA adjacent folks in the age of disclosure makes me think that there is some, you know, that maybe the agency is behind a little bit. You know, I don't know. But, you know, the CIA is always open season for conspiracy theories. So, you know, we can always.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for good reason.
Yeah.
And you know, we've talked about Valet on here. I mean, Valet is brilliant. Valet is part of the reason we have, you know, things like Google search engines, because he's the first one that he literally invented the method at which we could search text in databases.
Yeah.
Because before that it was just numbers, and he was told it was impossible to search text. I mean, which is ridiculous. Technology is not going to advance any further than what we have today. And he has brought so much to the UFO field. And then he does the Trinity book.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, you know, that and him sort of hobnobbing with Peter Thiel, who I'll go on record as saying I think is a terrible human being, and nobody should listen to, that, you know, that I think he is. And, you know, this is completely my own pop psychology, so I apologize, Mr. Valet, if I get this wrong, but I feel like as a gentleman who is older in life and getting towards the end, as we all do, that he has his own personal agenda. And at this point, he's willing to make whatever compromises, you know, he needs to in order to further his own research, his own knowledge base, his own personal agenda. And I don't, you know, who can really, I guess, blame him for that?
I agree.
Given all he's done, because I don't necessarily think that he's doing anything. Well, I don't know. I mean, giving credence to somebody like Thiel, I think, is damaging. But whatever. I think at this point, he is doing his own thing, and I don't think he's necessarily, I don't know, losing it, or I think he's just got less time, so maybe he's being less careful. I don't know.
Well, someone has suggested, and it looks like that he may have done the Trinity book to get the records release of anomalous stuff pushed back a few years.
Right.
Like backwards in time. And because it was at whatever year, and then they did the Trinity book, and he pushed for Congress to release records going back to that date. And that might have been, that might have been good. Yeah. And they did that. So that might have been his whole agenda is, I'll do this, but so I can get these records officially released.
Cool. Is that the case? Yeah.
And then you have like Whitley Strieber, and I mean Strieber, he's a legend in the UFO field, but it gets to a point where Strieber just seems like he's had, if someone comes to him with an experience, he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I had that happen. I did," or like even the telepathy tapes where he, has her on, and then he's like, "Yeah, I went to the hill and I talked to them," and so on and so forth. And it's just like, of course you did.
Yeah, right.
Like,
yeah, of course you did.
Like maybe you believe you did, or maybe you're just saying this because you want to include yourself in everything. But then he releases, like I think I fell off with Strieber when he released The Key.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of like, okay, what is this? And at the same time, I'll take Jeff Ritzmann seriously when he says this entity came into his home and talked to him.
Yeah.
But with Strieber, for some reason, I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's the content.
Yeah.
And then he said later that somebody altered the book and he had to republish it with the correct. And I'm like,
I remember that. Yeah.
I'm like, this is weird. It's almost too weird to make up. But now it's going to make everyone who liked that book go buy it again.
Yes,
Yeah.
which I think is very in line with what Whitley is doing. I still listen to Dreamland because it's like, I like to keep up with it. But yeah, I mean, he's completely, he nods and says yes to everybody that comes on. And he has some loony folks on there. I mean, come on. Yeah.
Well, have either of you read his latest book, The Fourth Mind?
No.
Do you
know?
Do you know what this is?
I think you told me about it.
Yeah, the fourth mind examines the anatomy, genetics, and abilities of visitors or non-human intelligences, including telepathy, telekinesis, and levitation. Strieber proposes humans once shared these powers lost after an ancient catastrophe, and advocates rediscovering them to connect with these entities. The book draws from Reddit posts on visitor physiology, Strieber's experiences, and warnings about climate change and nuclear risks. So, like, how are you writing a nonfiction book on the anatomy, genetics, and abilities of visitors?
Because we have the Star Child skull.
Oh my God!
Yeah, and Reddit posts are just as good as peer-reviewed articles in a journal.
Yes.
Now, I haven't read the book. Maybe the description does not do it justice, but
it could be true. Yeah.
At the same time, reading that description, I have zero interest in reading that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it just seems like I have to come up with something that's in line with the sort of materialistic view of aliens nowadays, but also still throw some of my genuine ideas in there, because he's always been concerned about climate change and stuff like that. He's always, I think he's one of the people that was pushing, for the bill to protect our electrical systems from solar flares and stuff. So he's definitely has good intentions, but like, I'm reading this and I'm like, is this just like, hey, I'm going to collect some stuff from Reddit and make speculations? Because
I mean, kind of like, I don't know if you listen to, and sorry to offend anybody who is friends with or Whitley, but it does seem, and maybe you can take this as a critique, is that, he's kind of just hawking his stuff, man. Like, it's all he talks about is you have to sign up. I don't know why people aren't signing up anymore. And, all the ads on Dreamland are for new releases of his books.
Yeah.
Which sometimes you can even, when he's like on there talking about it, it's, you can kind of tell in his voice sometimes that he's like, yes, and I'm releasing it in a paperback. It's a lovely, sumptuous paperback.
He is pleasant to listen to.
Right, but there is this sort of like, he's always kind of hawking wares on there,
Well,
talking about how he's not making enough money.
Yeah, which
My brain just went Khajiit has wares. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and that has been his thing since he started this. Yes. And he once said, this was the thing that killed my career.
Yeah.
Why would I do this if it wasn't, and why would I continue it if I didn't, if it wasn't a real experience, if I was making it up?
Yeah. I mean, that I think, I that brings, there's some truth of that.
Yes.
To me.
Yeah. I believe he had real experiences. And again, he got hypnotized, so that colors some of it. But I think he did more good for the UFO community than bad. But now it's kind of like, it's just.
I think you also have to understand that, people who go through this goes back to, Wilson's Chapel Perilous paradigm for it, is that, you might come out of it kind of funky on the other end, know, and that just might be what's happening. And, I think that going through the experiences like that, or, whatever experience a person goes through that gives them that same sort of Chapel Perilous experience is, you might come out of it on the other end. And I don't know, there might be a different way you look at the world. And I think that could be true of Whitley. He might be very narrowly focused on a very personal thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I still have respect for him, regardless.
Well, yeah.
That's not, he has never done anything where I'm like, okay, you're just blatantly lying. Like I said, even the telepathy tapes where he's like, I went to the hill. It's like, maybe he believes he did. That's not. Yeah. I don't know. And maybe he really did. Maybe he does have that connection where he could do something like that. I'm not saying one way or the other, but I'm just saying, like, my faith in his stuff has been lost a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. I'm certainly not going to take it as any. Yeah. I would take it as Whitley Strieber saying something. Yeah. That's about it. Yeah.
Still has good points to make, but also, I don't know. Anyway, we're out of time. But we can continue talking about stuff in a Patreon segment. Where can people find you guys, Chris?
Here or Bright Rectangle. That's it. Yeah.
Bright Rectangle on.
We can find you can find movies, Amazon, Troma. They might be coming through Film Hub at some point for The Hill in the Hole, at least. Yeah.
Nice.
Yep.
Saxon?
Yeah, if you have the number to the emergency red phone, you can always track me down that way.
Oh, okay.
Right. Yeah, but no, here and then I'm on some social media, Super Inframan, so you can find me that way too.
All right, awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show would be hard to sustain. So thank you all. And a special shout out to the patrons pledging $10 or more. Greg Ross, Cherry Trapezoid, Tactical Therapist, John Blackburn, Matt in Delaware, Mark Smith, Madeline J., Marty Garza, Critter 80, Gantic, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Sean Cosgrove, Matthew Sproul, Ruth Fortescue, Andrew Nichols, Martha, Tyler Glimstead, Christine, Mothman Bren, Mark Brady, Patricia Gaia Quinta, Kevin Schreck, Linz Jackson K, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Charles Davis, Kristen L, Giotto, Riker and Stark, Abby Allen, Bright Rectangle, Eric Citron, Kevin, American Rambler, Sam Sharon, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Eric Todd, Ann Witowski, Vincent Trewell, Will Powell, Barbara Fisher, Schmooples, Devourer of Mortal Souls, Jay, MTK, History and Coffee, Heather Wigton, Diane B., Beverly Williamson, Zach Thompson, Tom, Early Ritual, Jim and Sophie, Jonathan Frost, Victoria, John Bracken, Paul Jeffries, Janet's Planet, Ron Dupre, Laser Printer Jam, Perry Peters, Varosh K., MJ Armstrong, Jack Huntington, Lauren McLean, Stacy Sherwood, James Lindsay, Billuminati, Strange Stories with the Seeker and Skeptic podcast, Mark Shoemaker, Ron Dupre, Will Cherry, Seed Person, The Ghost Story Guys, Liam Huddock, Harold, Annabelle Smith, Caroline Walker, TDT Skunkworks, Craig Sagastumi, Colin Karras, Matthew Brown, and Paul Guile Simpson. Thank you all so very, very much. Well, I guess that was the last show for 2025. And of course, there will be a Patreon segment with it. If you want to become a patron, just go to the website, wheredidtheroadgo.com, and click on the big Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content almost every show. And bonus stuff. It's all commercial free. It's well worth the $3, I think. I hope. You get a lot of stuff extra. All right. yeah, so I hope everyone has a good New Year. I hope many of you aren't going to be hearing this till after the New Year, so I hope you had a good New Year, and we got some cool stuff lined up. And I had said repeatedly my book would hopefully be out before the end of the year. It is done. It has been proofread, but there's still some more steps I have to take before it actually gets published. So hopefully in the first few months of 2026, it will actually exist in a physical form, finally. Then I start working on the next one. But it should be a lot quicker because now I know kind of what to expect and what I need to do and things like that. I have a lot of help, luckily, in getting this done because I've never published a book before. So, yeah, that's coming along well, just not quite as fast as I would like. And partially that's due to me not having enough time to do it. But there's going to be sort of a GoFundMe thing to get it finally finished here soon. And again, that might already be up by the time you hear this because this is going out to patrons in 2025, but to everyone else in 2026. So, yeah, there's that. See you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is brought to you in part by our Patreons. You can find more at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. Website designed by John Tudor. The intro for this show was reimagined by Andrew Ham, a.k.a. Lord Happis on Spotify. And the voice is Psyche Kamir of Psyche Corporation. Artwork for the show designed by Timothy Renner, Jeff Ritzman, and Nadim Mahibahi. General inquiries, comments, etc. can be directed to contact at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Thank you all for listening and for all the support. www.wheredidtheroadgo.com